South Africans placed about 1.1 trillion rand in bets last year. Gross gambling revenue hit 59.3 billion rand, up 25.7%, with betting now the dominant driver and taxes up nearly a fifth. The question isn't whether it's big, it's whether the net impact is good for households and the economy, and what regulation and tax design should do next. For more, we're joined by Professor Heinrich Bohlmann, Economics Associate Professor from UP's Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. Professor Bohlmann, appreciate your time this afternoon. Now, how should we read into the 1.1 trillion rand turnover versus the 59.3 billion? What's the real GDP effect here?
Yeah, so in terms of GDP, it's that 60 billion number you're kind of looking at, because it's important to remember that 1.1 trillion number, the vast majority of that is in and out, right? So it's a lot of bets placed, a lot of payments coming back out again. The worry there is perhaps more the asymmetrical nature of that payout, right? We see few winners compared to lots of losers, and it's obviously, well, not obviously, but it's most often the most vulnerable in society that turns out to be those losers. Most of that 60 billion is, as we call it, the house margin. The house always wins, and that's kind of a number reflective of that, and of course the broader supply chain.
So if we look at the number of sports betting or similar industry or organizations, just do we have a healthy number, or do we have too many in South Africa?
No, we certainly don't have too many, but you also don't need that many for it to have a disproportionate impact. It's so easy these days to download an app. There's a number of these operators. They are sponsoring a vast amount of events and sporting teams, and so it's always in our face. It's very easy to download that app, put a couple of bucks on it, and hope for the best. And yeah, I mean, we've seen it in the numbers. The growth in the online betting has been enormous in the last couple of years. I mean, it now accounts for over 80% of that overall market is online gambling, and that is mostly happening on our phones. That's with us all day.
So I think the two main sides to this, right? There's the economics of it, and then the social side of it. So when we talk economics, was a 40% increase in the number of those. In fact, in that figure, that's risen now to 1.1 trillion rand, right? So what's behind that increase of 40%? I mean, that's absolutely massive.
Yeah, so that number of transactions is pretty much, I would say, 95% driven by the growth in the online industry. Like I said, those apps that are now on our phones, we don't physically need to go to a casino anymore. We don't even need to walk to our local grocery store to buy a lotto ticket. We just place bets on things that is often quite familiar to us, our sporting teams, other cultural events. It's mainly sports. And that's something a lot of people enjoy doing, but unfortunately often to their own detriment.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this statistic, Professor, but how many of those people that are contributing to this 1.1 trillion rand are actually addicted to gambling versus, you know what, I'm setting aside 200 rand a week or 100 rand a week, and this is what I'm going to spend. If I don't win, then that's it. I'll see it next week when I spend the next 100 rand.
Yeah, look, from the numbers I've seen, addiction is sometimes difficult to pinpoint, but it's certainly the vast majority of gamblers in the country are the poor and the vulnerable. They are grant recipients. It's people who, the line we often hear is don't gamble money you're not able or willing to lose, right? And unfortunately, that is not the case in South Africa. It's probably not the case globally. Too many people gamble with money they can't afford to lose it, and that's where the societal issues come in, right? It's fine if a billionaire loses $1 million. It's not fine if someone that's a grant recipient loses pretty much all of that money in a single go.
Now, at what point does the state, right, become responsible citizen, if you will, for want of a better description, and say enough is enough. So a few years ago, if we take a look at tobacco, for instance, as an example, right? Yes, adults were purchasing cigarettes and smoking as and when they pleased, but the government, or via the WHO, then said this is causing or leading to X number of deaths, or it is harmful to your health. So this is the branding that you need to do. In fact, they then took away advertising around sport or where tobacco is concerned. Is it time for government to move in and do the same where gambling is concerned?
I think we'll definitely see more of that. I think some of the legislation has recently been amended and is still going through the processes of being formally adopted. And I think that's going to be a big goal of it. And that's a good analogy, is the tobacco and alcohol industries. It's also similarly a form of, recreational activity. We sit, relax, we have a drink. Some have a smoke, others gamble. But we do have to recognize the societal dangers in those things going too far. We just like a bartender has an obligation to see if someone has had enough to cut them off. I think there also have to be over time regulations that has to somehow try and limit gambling if somehow there are signs that people have gone too far. But certainly I think limits on advertising and sponsorships may have to come in. That's going to be tricky because they've become a big part of that field. I was just watching a bit of Premier League, and Betway is a sponsor there. We see the other big gambling houses are sponsors in virtually every other bit of our society. So it's always there. Limiting that will be tricky. There will certainly be pushback. But there also have to be educational campaigns. We have that already, but that will probably have to be expanded. Just like we saw with smoking and tobacco, it has to come from both sides. We can't regulate, the life out of everything. There also has to be on the other side and educate consumers on the pitfalls.
Now, Prof, what stats do we not have that make good regulation hard? And how do we fix that by the next report cycle?
Look, I don't want to throw the gambling industry under the bus here. They're providing a service people want. What we have to do is almost like a behavioral economics exercise, make people understand what they're doing, where the limits should or could be. Similarly, betting houses needs to be properly regulated. That's falling in place. Consumers need to be protected. That's part of the legislation coming through. I think obviously it's always, it's a combination of factors. We can't just pin it just to one or two things. And I think, it in a sense, especially the online gambling, it's a young industry. I think both sides are learning how to navigate both its pros and its cons. And so it'll be interesting to see in this fast evolving industry if legislation can catch up, if tax policy can keep pace. I think there's definitely room to adapt tax policy in a way that perhaps some of that money can flow back into society. But of course, we've seen that even if it's on paper, that doesn't necessarily play out. We've seen the scandals with the National Lotteries Commission, and that's incredibly sad because it's money that's designed to really flow back into society that unfortunately has just flown back into a couple of entrepreneurs' pockets.
Yeah, now you talk about money flowing back into society, and in the household there are also challenges because according to some of the stats that we've read, from money that is used for entertainment, right? As little as 1% is used by families to go and watch a football match or a cricket match. 5.5% to 6% is used for things like going to the gym or similar activities, and as much as 55% is spent on gambling.
Yeah, that's the number. Half of that regular, recreation type spending now goes towards gambling. And of course, that points to a broader problem we have in society, and we saw it in some of the earlier programming here, is, people are desperate. We're sitting on enormously high unemployment. we're sitting with a huge number of societal problems. The macroeconomics of this country is pretty dire. The BER brought out another report recently so it's tough, and you certainly can't, in a sense, blame people for seeking this taking a chance. So in a way, macroeconomics has a lot to answer for in terms of the poor. People just simply feel like they don't have a chance out there, and they're going to take a chance on gambling rather, and that shows how dire things are. So we also have to look at the broader picture. There's a heck of a lot that needs to be improved, and as the macroeconomics of a country improves, as people have a legitimate chance of having a job, I think this gambling problem will kind of self-regulate itself. But as the macroeconomics of the country gets more desperate, you will see these kind of problems proliferate, and gambling will be one of those.
So, Prof, as we wrap, are you saying if we did a comparison of the levels of gambling in an economy where unemployment numbers are in the low percentiles versus where we are, 30-odd%, that gambling in those states would be a lot less?
No, it's the societal impact that's the problem, right? The Americans gamble as much, if not more, than us. But most of them gamble with money they can afford to lose, and that's our problem. Too much of our gambling is with money that can't be lost, and unfortunately then is most of the time. So that's our problem. The macroeconomics in South Africa doesn't allow for healthy gambling.
Fair enough. Now, is this pace sustainable, or a bubble likely to normalize once regulation catches up, if ever it does?
Now, look, I think the online gambling industry will certainly plateau a bit. I think user growth will slow down in coming years, but they've now certainly bumped those numbers up enormously. So growth will continue, but it will, of course, slow down. We can't continue, or they can't continue to grow at 30-40% a year. But yeah, tax policy, regulatory authorities, everyone will have a bit of catching up to do to kind of make sure the societal impact is not detrimental.
Many questions to be asked. Professor Heinrich Bohlmann, Economics Associate Professor from UP's Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. Appreciate your time speaking to us around gambling revenue, which has reportedly reached 1.1 trillion rand last year, a growth of 40%.